Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Live with Grace podcast. Today, I'm joined by Hannah Barber, a student athlete at the University of Alabama, and she is a fifth-year graduate player for University of Alabama's women's basketball team. And Hannah is an all-around player. For those who are familiar with basketball, she can really do it all on the court. She is a knockdown shooter, ranking fourth in SEC three-point percentage last year at 38.7%, which is crazy, and fifth in the SEC in three-point field goals made at 70. She's a leader in Alabama's assists 17 times last season, which is basically half their games. She's a lockdown defender, leading Alabama in steals 6 times last season, and just overall consistent player, scorer, leader for their team, averaging roughly 10 points per game and doing a lot more than what you can see on the stat sheet as well. But not only is Hannah a phenomenal basketball player, but she's also built a successful platform and brand for herself on social media with over 16,000 followers on TikTok, about 7,000 followers on Instagram. She has really taken advantage of all the opportunities that have arisen for athletes, especially since the new NIL laws have passed. And her page on TikTok, Instagram, etc. revolves around her workouts and lifestyle as a college athlete. She provides a lot of insight, advice, videos, knowledge to people about college athletics, balancing school and basketball, and all things relating to that. And before connecting with Hannah on Twitter to join this podcast, I actually knew who she was from seeing her on my For You page. So she's very successful with all the things that she's been doing on social media. So Hannah, as you could tell, has accomplished so much off and on the court. It would be really difficult for me to cover it all myself. Hannah, would you mind telling us a bit about your background?
Yeah, first of all, Grace, thank you for having me. I grew up in Birmingham, which is about 45 minutes north of Tuscaloosa. And so I spent basically my whole life dreaming of playing at the University of Alabama. For those who aren't familiar, obviously Alabama is a huge football state, and you're either an Alabama fan or you're an Auburn fan. My entire family were Alabama fans. I was a huge Alabama fan. I would come to football games and gymnastics meets and obviously basketball games, and that was the dream for me. It was never the WNBA. It was always playing basketball at the University of Alabama. So this experience I'm super grateful for and super fortunate to have. But yeah, I've basically I'm in my fifth year right now, and just trying to enjoy it before it all comes to an end.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, I was never like that. Like, I never had one school that was my dream school, but that must be so cool getting to play at your dream school, especially for 5 years with COVID and everything. What really inspired you to play at the college level or play basketball in the first place or do anything that you're doing now?
Yeah, so when I was little, maybe in like kindergarten or first grade, I played a bunch of different sports, mainly because my older sister was playing them. I would play basketball, soccer, volleyball. I think I even played on my brother's baseball team for a little bit. Just like whatever sport that was being played, I wanted to play it. And when I was in fifth grade, I went to a basketball camp. And at that camp, I met one of the most influential people still in my life till this day. She actually ended up being my high school coach when I was in high school, but I met her at this camp when I was in fifth grade, and my dad and I sat down with her and we basically said, the goal is to play collegiate basketball, and we're going to do whatever we can to make this become a reality. So from then on, I stopped playing other sports, and I basically worked with her and other people obviously as well, but that's kind of where the commitment and the vision began in fifth grade, saying, look, like, this is what I want to do, and we're kind of going to do whatever it takes to get there.
Yeah, that's really young, I would say, to specialize. I think I started in sixth grade, but I know it's really nice to have a mentor, especially since she was your high school coach that pushed you to be where you are today. What about starting a brand and everything? What was your inspiration to do that?
Yeah, so with TikTok, I always just really enjoyed like watching like vlogs and like behind the scenes and like day in the life videos, like those were always really fun to me. And I was living this life as a college athlete anyway. And I thought, wow, like it would be a really cool way for me to document my journey, to just kind of see like how the journey changes and what kind of growth happens along the way. And it started out just as that, kind of like a visual diary almost of what I was doing every day. And from there, I started seeing how it could possibly become a community. Like there were people that I was, frequently commenting back and forth with and having good conversation with and different things like that. So I think it kind of started out as just a way to kind of document what I was doing and turned into like a really cool community.
Yeah, I could see that because it's probably so cool to look back at when you first started and see what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Because sometimes the days kind of blend into each other if you're not documenting it, whether it's writing or videos or whatever. But that's super cool.
Sure.
I know that it definitely has become a community with like how many people you now have. And I know also a lot of people probably look up to you, and people that are aspiring to play college basketball look at your stuff and they're like, oh my gosh, like this is what it's like. So that's super cool.
Yeah, it's also kind of a cool way that I've found for like accountability. Because like if I'm making these kind of day in the life videos, then I know that day, like, okay, like if I've committed to, reading these 10 pages per day when I wake up, like I got to do it if I'm going to put it in my blog.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it was kind of a cool way, or like if I was documenting like what I was eating that day, it was kind of a cool way to hold myself accountable with my nutrition. So it was kind of cool how that worked out too.
Yeah, that makes sense because you don't want to put something on a vlog that's like, have it just be like a lazy day. I mean, there's definitely a time and place for I'm being real today, I'm eating the cookies or whatever.
Right.
But
No, for sure.
I get exactly what you're saying with the accountability piece because you want to like show people that you're eating healthy food as a college athlete, or, like, staying on track with stuff. So now I'm just going to transition a little bit to kind of a bit about your collegiate journey and the lessons that you've learned along the way. So with being a fifth year senior, are there any things that you wished you would have known earlier on in your career?
Yeah, there's definitely things. But if I could boil it down just to kind of one thing, it would really be to be where your feet are. Our coach, Coach Curry, she says it all the time. Be where your feet are. Be where your feet are. Whatever you're doing, whether it's in practice, whether you are, on a road trip, at like a dinner with your teammates, like whatever it is, just try to be as present as possible because it really and truly does fly by. Like everybody told me that. Everybody said it was going to fly by, but it really did. And looking back, like there are so many moments that I really cherish. And I know that there's also some moments that maybe I was either thinking about what's next, and kind of overlooking some moments. So I would definitely say just be where your feet are and be present, and just enjoy the journey.
Yeah, I think that's a great message. And I think especially when things are like it's easy to say that when everything's good and you're winning games and this and that, but like when you're in conditioning or when you're not having the best time, I think that it's a really important thing to remember because you can only ever live in the present, Maybe sometimes when people are having good moments, they have anxiety about what's happening tomorrow, but I think that's a lesson that can really apply to like all things in life too, not just sports. So,
For sure.
yeah, I think that that's a really good quote. I might make that the title of this podcast. It sounds good. But what would you say, like, how does the adjustment compare from when you first got to school, like when you first started playing in college, from high school to college, versus your adjustments from year to year? Because, like, last year as a freshman, I feel like it was a huge jump, a huge adjustment. Everyone said that it was going to be that, but it was just, I got overwhelmed at times, and now it's like, okay, I know what to expect, but it's still like every year I feel like you're leveling up a little bit. You're a little bit more comfortable. You're a little bit more yourself, or you know what I mean? Every year is
Definitely.
different. So what would you say about that?
Yeah, I would say that I quickly realized that no matter how prepared you think you are to make the transition from high school to college, there's no way to really know until you're in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to see until it happens to you, right? Like until you've made the transition, you're like, oh, like this is what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
People can tell you and you can think and whatever, but until you're in it, you just don't know. So I think for me, I was really fortunate that I came in with 6 freshmen. So I think that was really, really helpful for me because there was almost half of our team who were kind of making this transition at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. But I was somebody who, I mean, my transition took, I mean, really almost 2 full years for me to really be comfortable and kind of push to the level that I needed to play at in order to be on the floor. So it also kind of makes me think, you know, like regardless of where your journey takes you, or how much time it takes you, like that doesn't mean that, you know, you're not where you're supposed to be. That doesn't mean that because somebody else can kind of catch on and transition quicker, that your journey should be just like theirs. I think that the first 2 years that I was in college were extremely important for me. And without taking the time to really go through those first 2 years and really sit in those and figure out what I'm doing and where I'm going and who I am, like my journey would look completely different. So I'm super grateful for those first 2 years, even though like they were definitely challenging.
Mm-hmm. And I think kind of what we were talking about a second ago, it's sometimes hard to appreciate things when you're in that, you know. For me last year, like I didn't have any other freshmen. It was hard not to compare to like older players or get a little bit stressed. The pace of like the speed of the game is so much different and all that, but it's refreshing to hear, like I'm sure other people that are going to listen to this might be going through that same transition or might be still in that transitional period. You said it took you 2 years. And I don't think people really realize that. It's like I've talked about that same thing so many times. As hard as I trained last summer to be ready for college basketball, nothing could have prepared me for what it was. And just not only like the workouts, but the longevity of the season, like from preseason when we first get to school and then all the way through March, you know, like it takes a toll on like your mental health. It takes a toll on your mind. You have to really learn how to take care of yourself and stay within yourself, you know. I'm sure you could agree somewhat to that point.
Sure.
But what would be like your advice if you were going back? What would you tell your younger self, whether it be your freshman self or whether it be someone like your sophomore, junior, or maybe when you first started to get more playing time or whatever?
Yeah, I feel like especially at Alabama, it's kind of become like a cliche. Like we always say, trust the process, trust the process.
Mm-hmm.
But truly, that's what I would say is just trust the process because your career as a collegiate athlete is going to turn out greater than you could have ever imagined.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what happens throughout this journey, like whether it was on the court or off the floor, like this has truly been the greatest experience of my life. And
Mm-hmm.
there were moments where I was like, I would not have believed that
Mm-hmm.
when it was hard. But I would say just continue to trust the process and trust that each day, like you're getting closer to who you are meant to be as a player, as a person, in all areas. Because there are things that you're going to learn along this journey that are going to change your life forever.
Yeah, definitely. And the people you meet, the connections you make, and I guess all the lessons you learn through the hard things and through the fun things. I would
Yeah.
agree with that too. I mean, I don't have the same experience obviously as you do, but I can already see it just within like these 2 years. Like I already feel like I've grown so much. I'm a changed person from last year, you know what I mean?
Yes, no,
Um,
definitely.
so you said like you've been playing basketball for a long time now, since probably even before fifth grade when you were playing all those other sports, but for a while, and now you've been in college for a while. What were some of the biggest difficulties you faced in that athletic journey, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, so I feel like we've kind of talked about it a lot, but again, my first 2 years were probably the
Mhm.
hardest years. I was super fortunate when I was younger with the AAU programs that I played for in the high school team that I was on. I think we had 6 Division I players on our high school team, which is pretty rare. So it was a
Mhm.
lot of fun and smooth sailing. I really, really enjoyed my high school experience, but But again, that transition, once I got to college, it was really hard. And there was nothing that could have prepared me for that. And I'm just really grateful for the people who were kind of with me through those first 2 years, my teammates, my coaches, obviously my family. Like there was so much growth that happened. So I would say that was kind of the biggest, I guess, adversity that I kind of faced in my career.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we did talk about it a little bit. Would you say your biggest challenges more came from the physical stresses or the mental side of things, or just balancing things, or what, like, you think it was just all of it together, or what would you say?
Yeah, I would say it was mostly physical. And there were definitely parts of it that were mental, but the level of conditioning that you have to have is something that I was not prepared for. And so that took me a little bit to get adjusted, to figure out how to get in really good shape and be able to play both ends of the floor. That's another thing. Like when I was in high school, the intensity at which we have to now play defense is completely different. And so I would say the conditioning piece was a huge part for me, figuring out how to eat better, how to recover, like how to really take care of my body so that it can perform. That was a huge one for me. And then mentally, I think when I think about college athletics, like it's not really one thing that's hard, right? Like the sprints that you do, like, yeah, those are hard, but you get through them. Or like managing your time and figuring out like when you're going to go to class and study hall and meetings, like that's hard, but you figure it out. To me, the hardest part of collegiate athletics is showing up every single day to perform at the highest possible level that you can that day.
Yeah.
So you might have had a great day on Monday, but you have to wake up again and do the same thing on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then maybe you have Sunday off, and then you got to wake up and you got to do it all over again. So just that stamina, mentally and physically, was something that took me a while to build up.
You have to like really make the jump, because high school you might condition a little bit, but like my coach is big on conditioning and stuff, so it's like getting enough sleep, making sure you're getting enough food, but you're eating the right things, and making sure you're making time to do those things, and to foam roll at night, or to stretch, or to do the extra things. And then I would agree completely. Like, I think you stated it perfectly about being able to show up every single day and do that. And I think especially that's true when you're in that adjustment period and you're coming into being the person that you need to be for your team and really being a player that your coach can rely on. You have to really step outside of yourself. Like for me, something I'm trying to do is be more vocal, because I'm a natural encourager, but I'm not naturally the loudest person in the room. So it's kind of like being able to show up, run as hard as I can, play, like you said, play both ends of the floor. High school, we played so much zone. Like we played man and AAU. It's just, you have to be able to contain your man. You have to be able to talk to your teammates. Then you have to go down and keep at the pace, run the offense. Your brain has to be on all the time. So I would completely agree about that. Like being able to show up every single day and show up as your best self. Obviously that might not be the same every single day. Like you might have some days where your 100% is not the same as other days, because you might be going through something, or you might, I don't know, have something off the court. But I completely agree with all of your points that you just made. And then let's talk about leadership for a little bit, because everything I've read about you or seen is like you've really become a great leader for your team, especially being now a veteran player and, you know, having all this experience behind you. Are you a natural leader, or is it something that you've kind of developed your ability to lead over time, or as you've grown through your college career?
Yeah, I would say a little bit of both. I think I've always, like, even thinking back, like when I was little and like playing at recess, like I would always kind of like want to pick the teams or whatever, and pick the game that we were going to play. And I have an older sister and a younger brother, so that dynamic kind of created a little bit of both. Like I would follow my older sister and I would lead my older brother. So it's kind of like this balance But kind of going back to what I was saying about my high school coach when I was in 5th grade, um, she had previously coached at the collegiate level. So she obviously kind of knew what it took to be a point guard at that level. And she really instilled in me what it means to be a vocal leader and what it means to talk when you're on the floor. And so I am so thankful that that is a skill that I began to develop really early on, because I've seen that that can be one that's difficult for a lot of people. And if it wasn't for her, I don't think that I would have developed the skill the way that I did. So it kind of started out with her kind of, you know, just saying, like, if you're going to be a point guard, like, you have to be vocal, you have to lead. And then from then, just different experiences and getting to know my teammates and being a part of different leadership groups and also playing for some really incredible leaders. I've been super fortunate with the coaches that I've had that have led us really, really well, and trying to pick from them and just different experiences that have kind of cultivated what it means to me to be a leader now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that there's so much you can learn from other people. Like, I think sometimes you have to be a follower first to learn how to be a leader.
For sure.
Sometimes. And I also think that, I mean, it's obviously nice that you learn to be a vocal leader since you were younger, but I think that there's a lot of ways to lead also, like leading by example and doing things like that. And you seem like kind of similar to me in that fact that you're very driven. So I can see that you probably are a leader by example to your team and the people around you and stuff. But I think a lot of people are probably in that in between of, well, I'm a leader sometimes when I'm with these people, but like when I'm around these older people that I don't know as well, I might feel a little bit more uncomfortable being vocal or speaking my mind or whatever. And now I'm just going to transition to brand building and opportunities to grow on social media. I know you have a lot of knowledge in that area as well. So as we spoke about, you have grown a following and found a lot of success on social media. How did you get started with all of that? I know we touched on it a little bit already, but yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of started on Instagram with just by kind of sharing like different things about like my journey, whether it's like on stories or on feed, just about like my basketball journey, like going back to like when I was in high school, and then when I was in college, just kind of still sharing more and more of that. And then obviously during quarantine when everybody was on TikTok, I got on TikTok, and I just thought it was a really fun way to consume content. There were some really cool people that I started following and learning from, and there was just such a wide variety of content to consume on the app. And so I just kind of started to share my journey of being a college athlete. Like I was saying earlier, just kind of as a way to document, maybe hold myself accountable a little bit, and just play around with it. And then from there, I kind of realized like what it could possibly turn into, and started to just learn as much as I could about brand building. And obviously NIL kind of changed the entire landscape of brand building for collegiate athletes. But just trying to learn as much as I could about that process is kind of how I started.
Yeah, you've come a long way probably from when you first started. Was it ever weird or like uncomfortable to like post the things you were doing, or did you ever have people like make comments to you or anything, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so at first it definitely was, but it was also like, for me, I was just sharing what I was already doing anyways.
Right.
So I knew that what I was posting was coming natural to me. So while it was like a little bit uncomfortable to post, after doing it a few times, that kind of went away, thankfully. There are still moments where like I want to like speak or like, I don't know, like film something like with my face on camera, and I kind of like freak out a little bit. But overall, throughout the process, it's just been a really fun creative outlet for me.
Yeah, I mean, I could completely understand that at first being a little bit like, uncomfortable, but it sounds like for you, you're just being yourself. And there's some creators out there where like, you watch their stuff and you can just tell they're trying to be someone they're not or trying to like copy other people. But I guess just keeping that like authenticity of just posting what you're doing and posting how you're feeling or posting truths about being a college athlete. I think people see that like it's true and it's like genuine content. Do you see parallels between like the creativity that you use to play basketball and the creativity that is required to make content for social media?
Definitely. I think that anyone who's in athletics will tell you how much of, specifically basketball, how
Yeah.
much of it is truly an art.
Mm-hmm.
I will never forget one of our assistant coaches. I can't remember exactly what it was, like what the specific action was, but there was something that happened on the basketball floor one day in practice, and I asked him. I was like, "Well, like what should have happened, or what's supposed to happen?"
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, he said, "Basketball is not a science or a math." He's like, "I can't tell you exactly what's gonna happen next." He said, "I can't tell you what the perfect outcome is." He said, "But I can tell you that it is an art." And when he said that, it was like a huge like, oh, like I get it now moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously like my creativity, like with the basketball and expressing that with my teammates, like that I always felt. But to hear like somebody else say it to me was super eye-opening. And I definitely feel like there are parallels between the creativity required for both, whether that's the ways in which you express what you're doing to your teammates or through like your physical movements. There's just so many moving parts to both creating content and athletics.
Mm-hmm.
And the ways that those moving parts come together is what truly makes the art. And to me, that's kind of the draw to both of them, right? Like with basketball, for example, you have 15 people each year who come together to try to achieve this goal. And how they all come together to make that happen is where the true beauty of the sport happens. And that's kind of how I look at content, right? Like there's all these ideas and there's all these different moving parts, but how can I bring them together to create something special that I want to put out into the world?
Yeah. To talk about what your coach was saying, I think there's a lot of people that don't realize how much of an art and how much creativity is required in basketball because you never know what's going to happen. And there's just like endless possibilities and decisions you can make, and every decision leads to something else. And like there's creativity involved in like, creating a scoring opportunity for yourself off the bounce, or there's creativity in trying to create for your teammates or trying to, use different approaches on defense when you're in a game or whatever. But I think that I agree with you about, I think it's like a cool insight about the content too, because you can say one thing or you can show one video, you can show one like day in the life video, but do it completely different way one day versus the other day. So that's something that I've kind of realized too. Like I'm starting to learn a lot more about video creation because it's a lot in my major, and I'm obviously starting with this podcast and everything and trying to promote it. But that's really interesting to hear from somebody who has already, you know, found a lot of success with social media. But I would also say that there's a lot of athletes out there that have a lot of hesitation about starting a brand or trying to gain followers, especially those who might not be at big universities or might still be young in their athletic career. Do you think that any college athlete should or can create a brand for themselves, or do you think that, you should wait till you get to a certain place in your career and then be like, okay, now it's the right time to start?
I think that if it's something that you feel drawn to, then regardless of where you are on your journey, you should definitely start.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is it a great way to stretch yourself and kind of navigate who you are as a creative, but it's also, when you think about who you are as a collegiate athlete, you are already a brand, whether you post on social media or not. Just because you're a member of whatever university's athletic team, you are already a brand. And I think that if you feel drawn to expand on that and really create something that is meaningful to you and kind of reflects who you are, regardless of where you are in your journey, I think it's definitely something that you should do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And maybe also speaking to your point from earlier about how you look back and like you see your journey, maybe some, athletes that are my age or younger, that could be kind of how they express themselves or, show their journey, even if it's just for themselves at first and they don't have a huge following at first. I'm trying to develop my TikTok and brand for the podcast and stuff and kind of like do some stuff similar to what you're doing about insights about college athletics. But I think that that's really good advice for college athletes because, sometimes like we talked about earlier, it might feel a little bit weird for people or they might feel a little bit out of their comfort zone or be like, oh, what are other people going to think or this or that. So,
yeah. And I think another thing to add to that is that starting out, I wanted things to be perfect, right? Like I wanted my vlog to be the best possible vlog that I can make. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I just want to kind of put it out there that anything that you start out doing, you're probably not going to be very good at it. You might have like a natural kind of ability for it or kind of natural skills that will elevate what you're doing. But I look back on TikToks that I first made and I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I post that? But it just goes to show like how each time that you post, you get more and more comfortable and you're able to kind of grow in that way too. So that's another thing just to kind of think about is just progress over perfection, right? Like it's not going to be perfect starting out, but if you're willing to get outside of your comfort zone and just post and just create, if it's content that you really care about, then you're only going to get better.
Yeah. And I think that it's hard. It's just like what we were talking about with basketball to be consistent every day. Like you might not be perfect every day, but showing up every day and, posting your content or creating something or getting a little bit better at editing this type of video or get a little bit better at filming it from this angle or, you know what I mean? Tying the audio in a little bit better, this or that. And I've heard that a lot, and I think that like everyone suffers from that a little bit, especially people who are trying to grow on TikTok and stuff, or even creating podcasts. Like sometimes I feel like people don't want to post, myself included, if I record something and I'm like, oh my gosh, what if that sounded weird, or what if if I went off track a little bit, or this or that. Like I think that everyone's their own worst critic, and most people aren't really going to care if you mess up a little bit on a TikTok video. I feel like it's better for you in the long run to post it than to just not post anything at all,
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've definitely struggled with that and definitely still do at times. And one thing that I always try to kind of think about is that everyone is too busy thinking about themselves to also think about you. So that kind of provides a little bit of comfort.
And I think it's very rare for somebody to like be on, unless it's like a blatant like mistake or something that went wrong. I think it's really rare for someone to be like, oh my gosh, the text on this didn't stay long, the duration wasn't long enough, or little tweaks that you might criticize about yourself or you might have trouble fixing. Like, for example, on this podcast, one of my earlier podcasts, I was like, oh my gosh, the audio, like it sounds like it's too, like it's not clear enough, and I like tried to do all this editing on like Adobe Audition and all that. And then I was like, you know what? Like, it sounds fine. It's okay. So I could definitely relate to that, even on like a smaller level. And then also, you seem to have figured out how to connect with brands as well. Like, I've seen that you have some sort of connections to maybe some companies in Alabama, or also like Dr. Dish, which is a shooting machine brand. And so how did you find those first brand deals, or what would be your advice to other people who are trying to monetize themselves?
Yeah, I would definitely say figure out kind of who or how you want to show up for your community first. I think I waited maybe a few months before I entered into like a long-term partnership with any brand, just because I wanted to be sure that I kind of found my footing and was understanding kind of what I wanted to create. But then I didn't sign with any representation, and I'm still not signed to anyone for NIL. So all of the reaching out to the brands and reviewing contracts and all of that, I have done myself, which has been really cool to learn, because prior to NIL, I was not comfortable with those things. So that's been another really cool growth opportunity to figure that out. But I basically, at the University of Alabama, we have a Dr. Dish, and I was shooting on it all the time, and it just made sense for me to reach out to them. So I did, and we had a conversation, and their vision was something that really resonated with me, and we just kind of went from there. But I tried to think about things that I was already using every day, things that I knew that I loved, and also brands that were really community driven, and were doing things to make spaces better. I think that Dr. Dish, when you look at basketball and you look at what they're doing in communities, and you look at how they're bettering basketball players, like they're moving our sport forward, and that was something that I wanted to be a part of, because that community and that growth is something that's really important to me as well.
So do you think like the best approach to go about it is to just find brands that align with the things that you believe in, or the things that you want to promote, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I would say that. I would say if there's a brand that you really are passionate about, that you really want to work with, then definitely, yeah, like reach out to them. There's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, if you're signed to representation, that might look a little bit differently, but personally, I would just reach out. I'll also say though that if you are really committed to the content that you're creating, and you really kind of what we were saying earlier, right? Like with basketball, like if you trust the process, that as you're creating, like good things will come to you, then brands will start to come to you. I remember the first time a brand like reached out to me, and I was like, you want to work with me? Like what? Like I had reached out to all these people prior to that. And then I started having people reach out to me, and I was like, oh, like this is cool. So I would say just be patient with it, and try to find that balance, and just trust the process of it all.
Yeah, that's so cool. So when you reach out to people or brands, what do you usually say? Do you usually just like introduce yourself and then say that you're looking for opportunities to connect?
Yeah, there's a ton. So another piece to this puzzle that I feel like I should mention, because it's really important for me, is that my older sister is a social media manager. She has her own agency, and she does social media management for small businesses. And one of the things that her agency does is they collaborate with influencers for the brand. So with her kind of guidance, I was able to do things like create a media kit, and figure out, like what I should say when a brand asks for my rates, or how many deliverables make sense for X amount, like whatever it is. She was super helpful for me with that entire process. But there's tons of templates, and there's tons of resources out there, especially now we're a little bit over a year into NIL. There's tons of templates out there. But basically I would just say, hey, a little bit of background, and yeah, like if there's any opportunity for partnership, I would love to have a conversation and figure out if there's anything that we could work out.
So like, would you recommend people find something like what you got from your sister in terms of resources and stuff? Like, is that something that people can find for free, or is it like you can kind of do it without?
No, I think that there's so many free resources out there. That's been one of the biggest things that I've seen with NIL, is that at first there wasn't a lot of education around it. Obviously, you have your athletes who are at the top of their sport, who are really, really good at their sport, who are clearly going to get brand deals just because of their status as the athletes that they are. And then you have those people who are really, really good on social, who've created awesome communities, and they're going to get the deals, and maybe they have representation or maybe they don't. But there's a whole other percentage of athletes who are not necessarily trying to make the most amount of money possible or gain the most amount of followers, but are trying to create real community and a real personal brand for things after sport. And that's kind of the community that I've connected to. And there are plenty of resources out there. I'm trying to think of specific ones. I know that the Training Ground app is a really, really good one for kind of a holistic approach to building your personal brand. There's templates on there. There's different financial literacy resources. There is even like some self-awareness stuff and like maybe even some meditation. There's a wide variety on that app I really like. But yeah, if you just Google, anything related to NIL resources or media kits or things like that, there's tons out there.
Yeah, that's really good information to know, because I actually have never heard of like a social media kit or any of that kind of stuff. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that also might benefit from those things. So would you kind of say it's more quality of your audience over the amount of people that you have following?
Definitely, 100%. And I think that's kind of been at the core of everything that I've done on social, because part of my intention for sharing is to document my journey. The other part is to create real community and connection, because that's why I've always been drawn to sport. That's why I've always been drawn to being part of a team. That's why I've always enjoyed things like that. And social media was just another kind of outlet for that. So I would definitely say quality over quantity. And I think we're starting to see brands recognize that as well now. Whereas earlier on, it might have been more about the numbers, but now it's kind of taking a turn towards the quality of it all.
I think that it makes sense, because you'd rather invest in somebody who has a real, audience who's following them and looks to them and this and that, promoting your product or brand, versus somebody that just has a bunch of followers that don't really have a strong connection at all. And I also think that I've read things like, whether it be on Twitter or other places online, about those two categories you talked about, the athlete that's just at such a high caliber that they're 100% going to get brand deals, and the other is the consistent content creator that invests a lot and has an ability to network with people and make and create and build that audience behind them. So that's interesting to hear, and I think that it's important knowledge for people to know that are looking to grow as an athlete, as a brand, and looking to network with people. And what do you think is the value of putting yourself out there and starting a TikTok or starting a podcast or starting YouTube? Because while we might get NIL deals like we've been talking about, like a lot of these things might not make you a lot of money, and they might be you might be spending a lot of time on them. What do you think that where does the value lie in doing that?
Yeah, first of all, I would say that there's no number that you could put on the feeling of getting a message from, say, like a middle school player who saw one of your videos saying like, oh my gosh, like I want to come to a game, like, thank you for sharing that, or something like that. Those moments are really special, and that is a piece of it that makes it definitely worth it. The other piece would be all of the skills that you can develop throughout the process. I think about the things that I've learned just by making TikTok videos. And there's no other experience that I've had that could have taught me those things. Obviously, being an athlete, it can be challenging to get an internship or to get a job while you're playing. So this is another way for me to continue to develop those skills. My I'm in a marketing program right now for grad school, and a lot of the digital, it's with a concentration in digital and social media, and a lot of the stuff that we're learning, I have had like firsthand experience in already because of TikTok, because of figuring out how to create content around what I'm doing and how to edit videos and how to have conversations with people and how to negotiate and how to read contracts and how to do all of these things that prior to really trying to create on social media, I did not know how to do. So that's what I would say is it can really build your skill set. And then it can also connect you to a lot of really cool people. Obviously, I'm sitting here having this conversation with you, whether that's your peers, whether that's other college athletes, like I was saying earlier, maybe it's younger players, maybe it's brands, maybe it's people that may employ you one day. There's no better time to put yourself out there and to create what you want to create, because who's to say that the right eyes might not get on it, right? Like if one person who maybe works at a company that you want to work at one day sees your video, like it could truly change your life. There's no harm in putting out there what you want to put out there, and it's just another way to kind of showcase who you are and put into the world what you want to put out there.
Yeah, wow. I think that something that I talked about with Kirby too, like something that you just said, is that there's really nothing to lose in starting something.
Yeah.
The worst thing that happens is that nobody looks at it, and probably not gonna happen. You know what I mean? Like,
And sometimes you want that to be the case anyway.
right. Or it's like just like your family, and it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
that's fine. Because my family always likes seeing stuff too. But I definitely agree. I obviously don't have the same like work or networking experience as you do being in grad school, but I think there's a big difference in walking the walk and like learning by experience and just talking about it or learning about it in class. So that's an interesting point, because I don't know what classes I might take down the line that I might have the same experience, like, oh my gosh, I've already worked on this on my podcast, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And my last big question for you is, do you feel like a lot more prepared for your next chapter of life, no matter what it is, once you're like after creating this platform, like once your basketball career is over, do you feel like the things you've done so far have prepared you and equipped you for the things that you're going to face in the future?
I do. Obviously, there's so much more for me to learn, whether it's on the basketball floor, whether it's on social media, really in all areas of my life. I know that there is so much that I have left to learn, and I'm constantly trying to grow in those areas. But thinking back to basketball, that is something that I'm most appreciative of from basketball, is the ability to adapt and the ability to pick up on things and to be resilient and to keep working hard even when there's, you know, things that you're not really sure of, and finding a way to figure it out. I feel like that's what basketball has really taught me, the discipline that it takes, the consistency that it takes, the resilience to keep going. And those are skills that, whether it's on social media or whether it's in a different career down the line, that I will feel prepared to go into because of basketball.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're going to be successful. I'm just going to be following you on social media, correcting you. But I think that what you just said, the ability and the willingness to keep learning and keep that level of humility and the ability to adapt when things, you know, might shift or unexpected things might happen, that's a skill that can be applied whether you're a college athlete or whether you're going into the workplace, or no matter what, you know, stage of life that you might be in. So thank you so much for sharing that lesson, because I think that a lot of people could take something away from that to apply to their own lives. But without further ado, I just want to thank you so much for spending the time on this podcast. You have my current record for the longest episode, but I think we jam-packed so much stuff in there. Like, I feel like we could keep talking about this for like a lot longer, honestly. But Yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much for your time. I really liked learning. I feel like I learned so much, not only about your college experiences, but also about branding. Like, there's so much that I don't know about marketing and creating content and this and that. So it was just really helpful to hear all of that. I'm sure there's a lot of people that also are going to take a lot away from this episode. So thank you so much.
For sure. Thank you for having me, Grace. I will definitely continue to listen to your podcast.
Okay,
Like
cool.
I was saying earlier, it is awesome that you're doing this. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And to everyone listening, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you took something away from this episode. I think there, especially if you're a college athlete listening to this, there's a lot that you can take away and use to grow as an athlete or as a marketer for yourself or as a creator or just as a person. So thank you for tuning in and stay tuned for the next episode on the Live with Grace podcast.